Welcome into Words with Wallace. I am your host, Nick Wallace. We're coming at you with a bit of a Celtics vibe check. Was certainly hoping the vibes would be a little bit higher when we got around to this episode, but as you guys can see, as you guys just heard, we are joined by a very special guest here. The Celtics were rolling a little too hot when I decided to do a Celtics podcast last week, so I had to search far and wide for the most negative but still a diehard Celtics fan that I could find. My good friend RJ Rosazza joins us today. RJ, how are you feeling?
Good, yeah. Thanks for having me. Talk about just a perfect storm of having me on. Grant Williams goes to the line. I'm just like, miss them both. And I know they're losing in overtime, and I'm just going to – this is just the perfect situation for me to come on here because what a choke job. Like, buddy, maybe you should stop worrying about you and your, like, Batman masks that you wear in the post game and freaking work on your free throw shooting, big boy.
Oh, man. That's a great summary of how most of Celtics Nation is feeling right now. If you guys couldn't guess, we're coming at you. It's Monday, March 6th. Right after the Celtics, I think they ended up losing by 4 to the Cleveland Cavaliers, a game in which they were leading almost the entire time. I'm pretty sure the first time they fell behind was with seconds left in regulation. They ended up, obviously tying it up and sending it to overtime. And it marks off basically a little bit of a slide for the Celtics here. They've lost 4 of their last 5 games, all to Eastern Conference and potential playoff opponents, depending on how the seedings shake out. So, RJ, I wanted to turn it back over to you. What was your thoughts when, of course, just to kind of set the scene a little bit, there's some controversial calls on both sides at the end of regulation where Donovan Mitchell seems to get a phantom foul that sends him to the line to eventually tie up the game. And then we have, basically 5 seconds left in the game. We have no timeouts left. The Celtics have to go the full length of the court again, no timeouts to advance the ball. And Peyton Pritchard, Lil PP, gets the ball, takes it 94 feet to the basket. Unbelievable that he's even able to get a look at the rim. It looks like he gets fouled, but there's no call on that. Grant Williams is in the right place at the right time, goes to tip the ball in, and he's fouled and sent to the line for 2 free throws. Wanted to get your thoughts at that moment and hear about.
I was surprised that they called both of those because up to that point they seemed like they were letting them play. Like the Celtics were driving the ball to the basket when Cleveland was going on those runs, and the refs were not blowing the whistle. And then when Mitchell brought the ball to the hoop there, that was not a foul. I mean, it was like that's a phantom foul. He didn't even get touched, and I don't think it was a foul coming down the other end too. And that's just a typical NBA game where the refs can't help themselves at the end to get themselves involved. Like, just let them play. Like, you don't need the freaking, like, both those games, it came down to free throws there at the end.
Absolutely. And I think that it's pretty interesting because to Joe Mazzulla's credit, and we'll talk about him more in a little bit, head coach of the Celtics, something that he's been widely criticized for is his use of timeouts and late game, management decisions. And it seemed like he did a great job where he had, he used timeouts as Cleveland, made a couple, they pushed on there. I think the Celtics were up by like 10 with about 7-8 minutes left or so. And Cleveland was inching back. He used a couple timeouts along the way, but he had one in the back pocket to use for that challenge. And that's the frustrating thing for me. It's one thing to get that call wrong in the moment. It was a terrible no call. Mitchell goes to the basket. Grant Williams was as straight as up and down as you could be in that moment. And,
it's such a tough call to make because it's like, do you challenge it?
Yeah.
And risk it getting, then you lose that timeout and you can't advance the ball. But, I mean, Pritchard did his job. I mean, I couldn't believe nobody really picked him up on Cleveland. They let him torpedo completely across the court.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know.
And he's coming in straight off the bench, too. They made the decision to put him into the game where he hadn't been in for a while, I think. I don't even really remember the last time he was even in the game, maybe at the start of the fourth. But, for him to come in, have the presence of mind, like, hey, I know I'm quick. I can get to the hoop in, basically 6 seconds less than that. And get off a decent look. And then, we spend the whole replay period looking at the Pritchard take, thinking that he's the one getting fouled, at least we did on the Celtics side of things, just to have, Grant end up at the line. But we talked about this right before we started recording, but I thought, something about Grant Williams' stupid face when they're just sitting there. And of course, in his defense, like, it was a masterful job of icing him by both the Cavs and then just the situation that he found himself in because, there's all this time they're replaying. It's a foul on Pritchard. It's a foul on Grant. Was Grant Williams' tip-in attempt before or after the buzzer? Like, we weren't sure of all that. So Grant's just sitting there for a while, not even knowing if it's him or Pritchard at the line. But they show his face, like, once it's known that he's at the line, and it didn't exactly exude confidence. And then the big point that we touched on was Donovan Mitchell comes up and says something to him. And you just see the quote from Grant Williams. You see his lips. Donovan Mitchell's face to the or back of his head is to the camera, and you see Grant Williams go, "Oh, I'll make both of them. I'll make both of them." And that's
clearly was got in his head big time. And I think they said coming into today's game, Grant Williams had made 4 shots since coming back from the All-Star break, and I don't know if you noticed on Saturday night with the dunk contest and everything, he was there, All-Star weekend,
courtside,
buddy, I think he thinks he's a main character or something, but why don't you go spend some time with your family? All-Star weekend is for the stars, not these guys that are the 4th, 5th guy on the bench. He should probably have been meeting with a dietitian or something during his break, because, a lot of baby fat on that guy.
Yeah, you you touched upon some things there. I think you're right. It was a lot of Grant Williams, a lot of Jose Alvarado. They would cut to courtside, as if I remember a time in which it was Dwight, LeBron, Durant, those guys sitting courtside for All-Star Saturday night. And we had.
What is Cornette doing on the court too? You had texted me. He shouldn't even be anywhere near an NBA court, in my opinion. I'm sorry, the thing he does where he jumps is so bush league, and he looks like a complete clown out there doing that.
Oh man.
I
think that
big guy depth later, but I don't. That's one of my concerns going into the playoffs here in about a month and a half.
Certainly, and we'll touch upon that more when we get to Joe Mazzulla and some late game management. But overall, I think overtime it looked like that. Just to kind of focus back on the game that just happened against the Cavs. It was pretty the vibes. And not only that, and we'd be remiss to say that it was like getting slapped in the face 3 different times at the end of the game, because you had, again, there's virtually no time left. I think there was 0.8 seconds or something like that when Grant was shooting the free throws. The game is tied, so he just needs to make one of them. He front rims the first one, and then there's all these substitutions. Everyone gets their big guys in the game, just to make sure that if there is a tip situation, that both teams are adequately prepared. Another 45 seconds goes off the clock. Grant's iced even further, and then it's in and out on the second one in his defense. So not only are we as Celtics fans pissed about that, but then Marcus Smart flies in from outside the arc and gets a hand on it, and that actually looked just as close as the second free throw attempt. So we have 3 misses with less than a second left in the game, all of which could have sealed their fate in a game where, again, the Celtics are missing Jason Tatum, they're missing Al Horford, they're missing Rob Williams, and we're playing a Cleveland team at home on the back-to-back off of a double overtime game against the Knicks. And so vibes are fantastic heading into that fourth quarter. We're just we're not even supposed to be here. I mean, we had talked about it before.
That would have been a huge game to steal. Like you said, on a back-to-back, you have no Tatum. When I saw that Tatum was out tonight, I'm I'm not going to kill them if they lose this game, but this is going to hurt them again in the standings. If we were to talk 3-4 weeks ago, but they're getting the 1 seed. I'm not even worried about it. Now, what are they, 2 games behind Milwaukee? Somewhere around there? We're coming down to, first, second week of March here. They got to pick it up. If they fall behind 3-4 games, that could be it. And, we can go, we'll talk more about their ceiling later, and we could talk about home court and stuff. But this seemed like a game I'm wow, this is going to set them back on the right path. And like I said, no Tatum, but still you come away feeling disappointed, because it was a game they still had enough offense where they should not have blown that lead. They had Brown chucking up awful threes, clearly, especially in overtime. I think they had to have had tired legs. And that's the other thing. You have back-to-back losses like this in back-to-back nights, and both go to overtime. So now you have all these miles put on these guys' legs for 2 losses.
Yeah, and it was a pretty obvious situation, especially for a guy in Al Horford, for him to be out with just, basically a rest day, a maintenance day for him. You felt that, the big man minutes we'll talk to more in a sec, and that were a little bit questionable that I felt at the end of the game. But just to, again, recap the Celtics' last 5 games, they lose 4 of their last 5, all the Eastern Conference opponents. This is, again, we just briefly touched upon the double overtime loss to the Knicks last night. The Cavs lost in overtime just now. They blew a 28-point lead to the Nets, which was the largest blown lead in the NBA this season, which is, to the Celtics' credit, I'm pretty sure they had a 28-point lead in the first quarter, so there was a lot of game time for them to end up.
Had 5 points with 3 minutes left in the first quarter in that game.
Yeah.
Just bad.
Really tough situation for the Celtics, but that leads us to today and a Celtics vibe check, where we're going to be touching on the coaching situation first and foremost, and then a few other healthy Celtics debates along the way. So with that, RJ, anything else to add on the game tonight before we get into Joe Mazzulla?
No, we can jump into it. I'm good to go.
All right, perfect. Well, this leads us to what I wanted to do. I think this is a really interesting time to evaluate Joe Mazzulla, 34-year-old, first season coaching the Boston Celtics, obviously in the aftermath of losing Ime Udoka in a bit of controversy right before the season started. Just to kind of recap the Celtics timeline, they've been atop the East standings basically the entire season until basically exactly a week ago, in which the Nets. They lost the Knicks, and then they were supplanted by the Bucks atop of the Eastern standings. And now it's like I feel like this is a time where we understand he's 34 years old. We understand he's a first-year head coach, but I think all that cute storyline, like wow, I can't believe we're up here again, type stuff is starting to wear off because it's nut crunch time. It's the playoffs are right around the corner. You're about 15 games out from the end of the season. I wanted to open up the floor to you on how would you evaluate Joe Mazzulla this season? What is your confidence level in him heading into the playoffs? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but give him a letter grade for the season as well.
I hate trying to judge NBA head coaches because it's such a tough sport to do it because it's a players' league. It's not the NFL where you can just tell in the NFL when a guy can't coach. In the NBA, it's so different. Greg Popovich, all the success he had, but if you don't have the players, you're not going to win the games, especially in a situation where Mazzulla steps in. He wasn't selected as the head coach, and you don't know how much credit to give him, and then you don't know how much to actually kill him because, like I said, it's a players' league when the players don't show up. To be fair, like a B minus. I'm not going to go worse than that because they're still up there, but I haven't been overly impressed with him, but I also haven't, I don't know. We could talk about the timeout issues. Maybe sometimes he doesn't have the best in-game management. And I know the Celtics removed the interim tag from him within the last few weeks. And I wonder if they think he's the guy for the future, if it's one of the things where they don't want to go into the playoffs with the players not knowing, if he's the guy going forward. This is your voice in the locker room going past the season. I don't know. But, yeah, I would go B minus at the worst, but I wouldn't go above a B for me.
That's nearly exactly what I had, and I think the key point that you touched upon there that I meant to actually do in kind of the open of this segment is you're absolutely right. It is so, I think the hardest thing to do in any sort of sports analysis job is evaluate coaching because at the end of the day, there's so many different variables that go into this, especially in basketball where you got only 5 guys on the court, and above all else, it's going to come down to the amount of talent and the players in your roster and whatnot. So it's really difficult. At the end of the day, it just comes out to most people are just on their couch and they're looking at the wins and they're looking at the losses, and then they're only judging the surface level stuff that's really easy to understand. They're not going to be that the play calling here was questionable. Even the lineup decisions can be easy to evaluate, but even that gets tricky when you're looking at a 12-man rotation. So you end up falling back on things like timeouts, like you touched upon, right? He's been often criticized because at the end of the game he's a player's coach and he lets his guys play, and you saw that in the Knicks game. Just obviously as a recent example where last night, at the end of the game, there's I think 15 seconds left, and I want to say it was regulation. It could have been the first overtime, but
I think you're thinking of the same play that is coming to my mind right now. I think Brown was holding the ball till 2 seconds, and they gave it to Tatum in the high post, and he's by the 3-point line.
I think you switched it. I think Tatum had the ball and Brown was in the high post. Okay. But yeah, exactly. And Tatum's waving his arm and Grant Williams is out there and clearly doesn't know the play. And then he ended up taking a timeout, but again, it's moments not even moments like that as much, whereas, I think he's been most often criticized for when a team is on a big run and, needs to be a momentum shift, and he's just kind of letting his guys work through it and play through it and not make a lineup change or anything like that. And I think that is really, low on the totem pole in terms of my issues in Joe Mazzulla. And I think the difficult thing for Joe Mazzulla and the situation that he's been given, in addition to him, inheriting this team right before the season, like you said, he wasn't exactly selected. He was just in-house, and he's inheriting a team, coming off a finals appearance, is that, the Celtics are really good and there's really high expectations. And not only that, they're a deep team, and they're a team that has 8 players, I would argue, and I'm sure you might agree with this, that you would feel comfortable being out there at the end of a game, right? I think, our traditional starting 5, if you will, in Smart, Brown, Tatum, Horford, and Rob Williams, of course, and then guys like Brogdon, Derek White, and Grant Williams have all proven that they're also worthy of being out there in the right lineup. My level of concern with Joe Mazzulla is that I, at this point in time, do not trust him to have the best lineup for that specific matchup in game out there on the court. I think that is the problem, because we've seen so many different guys step in this roster. Like, Brogdon has had moments, White has had moments, Grant has had moments, namely in the playoffs last season, where depending on what the defensive matchups are like, depending on who has the hot hand, any combination of those guys, the only certainty that we really have is that Tatum and Brown are going to be out there. Beyond that, it's all who has the hot hand, what does the defensive matchups look like? And so I think that is the problem. That is my lack of trust in Joe Mazzulla. And I think you saw that on display, namely within this 5-game slide that they've been on a couple different times. Like, I feel like Derek White specifically has been on fire lately. He was playing fantastic yesterday. And you had a guy in Grant Williams playing 40 minutes in all the crunch time minutes of the overtime, both overtimes yesterday, out there on the court when Derek White was just sitting there stone cold on the bench. And like you mentioned earlier, you're right. Grant Williams, before the game tonight, had made 4 shots since the All-Star break. 4 field goals were made by Grant Williams since the All-Star break. It's been 6 games. Like, that's insane. And so for him to not have, there's a difference between trusting your players and, maybe he's trying to be, get more continuity between the core guys because we have had so many injuries. But what are your thoughts on the late game, decision making and lineup choices from Joe Mazzulla and your trust in him having the right guys out there for the matchup?
Well, yeah, I think this kind of comes down to him again getting promoted within. Like, do these players respect him, and does he have a good relationship with them? Because does he feel comfortable enough taking some of these guys out? Like, if he doesn't feel like Smart is the right guy for the situation, does he have the balls to take him out? Is that going to, is Marcus Smart going to throw a fit if he does that? Like, and that's the thing. Like, with Ime, I think you clearly saw they turned the season around halfway through last year, that he had a way to somehow get to these players. And we don't know if Mazzulla has that. So, I mean, I don't like this lineup that he plays where he's got Tatum, Brown, Smart, Horford, and Rob Williams. I think we saw that in the last couple of weeks when Smart's come back, that I don't like that lineup. I mean, we'll get to Marcus Smart later, but, I mean, I would have no issue putting, if we're going to play, I would rather have Brogdon, potentially White in over him in some situations, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. So I won't get my hopes up for that. Yeah, that's pretty much what I got on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really fair, and I think that's a level of concern, right? Like, you have guys like Marcus Smart that, is only a couple years younger than the guy, and he's been in Boston for, his 8th or 9th season now. Like, he's beloved, clearly, and so, he's a prime candidate where, you have guys that I would argue that have straight up been better than him for the majority of the season, and Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon that play the same position. And yeah, you're losing something defensively, but you're not losing that much because you have 2 above average defenders right there. And so it's tough. And then it's like, well, when do you go small? Do you go small? Would you have liked to see them go smaller in a game like the Philly game, that we ended up winning? That was the one game we've won in this recent slide. But it was still a little rocky at the end because he was completely married to the idea of having the, again, I say the traditional starting 5 when everyone's healthy, even though we haven't seen it much this season. Smart, Brown, Tatum, Al, and Rob. When those guys are out there, he feels comfortable just, rolling with that no matter what. And so, that is my level of concern with Joe Mazzulla. It's not as much the timeout thing. It's just, being able to identify the right lineup. And again, it's totally dependent on the matchup and being able to make that decision on the fly and, having the balls to make that tough decision and be like, hey, man, this just isn't the matchup for you. We like the looks that Malcolm's getting. Like, Malcolm Brogdon's shooting 46% from 3 this year. Like, you're going to want to have him out there. Yeah, you're going to want to have him out there in the corner, like, for an open look, which he's going to get if we have Tatum and Brown creating. So,
I don't know if you've noticed this with him, but after games, he can be real, like, short and kind of defensive with the media, too. I don't know if you've seen any of this. He's quick to bite their head off going back at him, and that, to me, is like, dude, like, you got promoted from within, like, you've only been the coach here, and, like, is the media really already getting to you? And, like, this is a big market team. What if things go south big time? Like, I don't know if he's going to be able to handle this pressure from the media. And I think you want some of these, like, media members on your side too, because I mean, he'll be the first. Like, he will be this. If this team collapses, he'll be the scapegoat. Like, it's how it's gonna go. Like, it's not gonna be the players. It's gonna be him. So you would think he would try to get some of the media on his side, but I've seen some audio of him be like real rude to some of the, like, journalists that, and, like, let's be honest, some of these Celtics journalists are pretty much fanboys. Like, there's a couple of respectable ones, but, like, they're not, like, asking you very critical questions. They're asking you about the timeouts you use. Like, the fact that you get so defensive about the timeouts shows that you're, like, insecure. about how you've been using them. But yeah, I don't know. That's something to just look. When you've only been here for this long, like this is nothing. Like we know how the city can get. So I don't know. It's not that bad yet, but that's something to look if this team continues to struggle.
Yeah, and that's something I don't have a ton to add on, just being based here in the Dallas area. I'm just not as exposed to local sports talk. It's just not as easy for me to access that kind of stuff.
That's exactly where I heard it.
Yeah,
on the radio.
Which makes sense, but I've heard a little bit of it, and I think in my limited exposure to it, I kind of like him having that edge to him, just because he understands he's a first-year head coach. He's a young guy. He's not even older than some of the players in his rotation, so you have to have that edge. You have to have that confidence that you're not going to second guess yourself, but. Just to put a bow on it, again, I think you're right on with the letter grade you gave him. I'd say B- is fair. Because, again, big picture, we're in a great spot. And I think that, I don't foresee us, and we'll talk about this later, but I don't see us falling any farther than the 2 seed in the East. I think that's still kind of our floor. I think we're going to finish out, decently strong. I don't know if we'll be able to overtake Milwaukee, but, if you told us before the season you're going to be a 2 seed in a really loaded Eastern Conference, and again, there's no controversy, right? There's never been any big story out of Boston this year like we've seen with some other teams, young teams, contending in the opposite conference. I think that it's been nothing but
Udoka.
Yeah, exactly. But
I want to ask you, do you think he'll coach again? Because if you remember when Steve Nash got fired, there were like some rumors heating up that that the Celtics were gonna fire him and he was gonna go to Brooklyn. And all of a sudden, those rumors just vanished, and they ended up going with Vaughn or Jock, whatever his name is.
Jock Vaughn, yeah.
So that makes me wonder. Like, did Brooklyn go either get some bad PR backlash, or did they go do their due diligence and found out? We really don't know. We don't have to get into the details because this is so long ago. We don't really know what exactly happened with the Celtics. So I wonder if it's much worse than we think, and that's why they didn't hire him. But we don't have to get too much into that. That was just something that.
No, that's a good question.
Talking about him.
Yeah, we'll keep it quick, but I think that I think he will. I think he absolutely will. I was actually just thinking about that weird Brooklyn situation earlier. My 2 cents on it is that. Brooklyn we're still, just coming off a lot of the Kyrie anti-Semitic BS, storyline that they were dealing with the movie he tweeted out or whatever. Like, I don't want to get into that too much. I haven't read up on it in a while, but a string of really disparaging Kyrie comments and anti-Semitic, events, you could say, coming from Kyrie, that they had enough negative PR circling around them. And who knows, maybe that was around the time where they could already see the writing on the wall that Kyrie was going to want out and Durant was going to want out. Like, maybe they were already in on that. Like, I know that was kind of early for, they were still, they had a nice little stretch after that, but maybe they were just kind of sitting there like, we have enough bad PR as it is. And Josiah's like, how about we just don't? The owner of the Nets, how about we just don't deal with it? But that being said, I think he'll definitely coach. I think he's probably on the short list of like the most desirable head coaching candidates, I would imagine, especially now that Atlanta moved on from Nate McMillan and they picked up Quinn Snyder a couple weeks ago. I think Quinn Snyder was right there as the other name atop the list. So I'd actually be pretty surprised if he doesn't get a head coaching gig. I think this is going to be, and again, this is, assuming that there's no other further information that came out in the Celtics scandal. If the information that's out now kind of stays at what it is or something along those lines, I could see he may get a job somewhere else. But with that, RJ, you had a pretty controversial tweet yesterday. Do you mind telling the viewers exactly what you tweeted and give me your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, I just think Marcus Smart is the most overrated Celtic of all time. I'm so sick of this guy. It's just the experience of how much the fanboys around here overrate him. And you know me, I'm an anti-fanboy, and I can't stand it from the guy. Like, he is the perfect player for the Celtic fanboy. Like, he's out there, he's got his hair dyed green, like he's a 14-year-old boy. Like, they love it. And I'm sorry, he's the third best guard on the team right now. I have the numbers right here. And like you said, yes, he's probably the best defender out of the three, but the drop-off isn't that big, and the other two are better offensively. So, and that's my point, but I don't think that it's ever going to happen where Mazzulla will ever, I'm not saying take him out of the rotation, but at the end of these games, play the other guys. I don't think that'll ever happen. Since he's been back for 8 games. I think his first game back was, did he come back the game before the All-Star break, I think? Or maybe there's one,
I think so.
Back. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
around there.
He's been back for 8 games. They're 500 since he's come back. He's been a minus player, if we're talking plus-minus, in 6 out of the 8, and if you were to total up, he's a minus 40. In those 8 games. So, yeah, not exactly good. Yeah, he's not a bad player, but defensive player of the year. I think he won defensive player of the year because he had his 2 stars crying about it to the media all year, and he was pretty much promoting himself to win it, which I don't really ever see anybody do, like to be crying to be like acknowledged. I think he has a huge ego too, which I don't know if you saw before the season started that Tatum, Brown, and Smart were on the cover of SI.
Yep.
And Smart was on. I mean, I 100% believe that Sports Illustrated didn't want him on the cover, and that Tatum and Brown were probably like, you know what, let's just bring this guy in because we don't want his feelings hurt. We have to, child gloves with him. So yeah, that's kind of the core to my issue was with him. Yeah, I don't think that's pretty much all I got with that.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I think you're right. I disagree with you on like, if you're looking at the all-time legacy of Marcus Smart in his Celtics career, I'd push back on it. Like, again, I don't know, you're in a different, you're exposed to a different type of sports talk media. You're way more into this Boston sports talk scene than I am. So I can't imagine the stuff that you hear on a day-to-day basis. But for me, I think, on the national level anyway, I think, he's probably properly rated. Maybe he's a little overrated. But I do absolutely agree with you. This is, without a doubt, the least valuable and the least essential Marcus Smart has ever been in the entirety of his Celtics career to the team. And again, that's not even, it's partially because, he hasn't been shooting the ball great lately. I think, some of the late game turnovers have been, or not even late game, but just turnovers in general. He's not even like, I don't even know what the number of turnovers is, but like the turnovers that he does make, it's like, what were you even looking at? Like, he definitely leads the team.
Five turnovers last night, and he got fouled out. And yeah, another issue with him is I think Brogdon and White know their role. They know how good they are. Smart thinks he's better than he is. I think he shot the ball from 3 14 or 15 times last night. I'm sorry, I don't need Marcus Smart shooting the ball that many times when I have Tatum who played last night. Like, I don't need that. That's not good basketball. That's not how you win. That's no.
Yeah, I think post-injury that you were discussing, that was, it was right before the All-Star break or around there or whatever. Like, I think since then he's definitely regressed to a little bit more of the shot selection issues that we saw from early career Marcus Smart, and like late to come to terms with the fact that, like, hey man, you're a third best offensive, option, and then again, that's at best, you're going to be the third most, the best offensive option to score the basketball on any given play. Like, I think last year, he really took his game to another level though. And I think that overall, the reason why I'm more likely to be able to defend Marcus Smart is because I think if you look at the Celtics, just bigger picture again, like the last 5 years, the big turning point, I would argue, and I know they've had successful teams in the past, I think they hit a major turning point exactly halfway through last season, right? They went from being a middling team in the East to, rapidly rising the standings. I think they finished as the 2 seed, but they were far and away the best team in the NBA the second half of last year. And I think that the main thing that they unlocked last season was the previous years. You look at the point guard position of the Celtics, right? You go all the way back to Isaiah Thomas, and then you had Kyrie Irving, and then you had Kemba Walker. And what do all those guys have in common? Well, they were big-name point guards that were really great on the offensive side of the ball, but were all major liabilities on defense, right? When our team finally was like, you know what? Maybe instead of looking on the free agent market or looking on the trade market for a guy to bring in at the point guard position, let's just look at what we have in-house in Marcus Smart. And I think that defensive jump, because again, the defense this year has been slightly disappointing compared to expectations, based on last season. But last year, their defense was insane. That's why every defensive metric for them was to the moon. They were the NBA analytics community's, hands down choice to win the finals, is because there was no one to hide. We were hiding Isaiah Thomas. We were hiding Kyrie Irving. We were hiding late stage Kemba Walker. You go from those guys being a weak link to who is your weak link out there? Is it Tatum? Is it Brown? I don't know. Is it Al? I don't think it's any of those guys. You have 5 extremely above average defenders out there, and I think having the ability where he didn't take a massive leap offensively, but I did think you saw a part of his game where he was quicker to defer. He was, I think he did come to terms with his own mortality a little bit and being if this team is going to take a leap, it's going to be doing it on the backs of Tatum and Brown. Maybe it was because
I agree with you, and I just think it's trending in the wrong direction again. And he's going back to the Smart before last year. I thought the second half of last year he understood, I'm not one of the main guys. I got to facilitate the basketball. And he's not doing that now. I do wonder if the defense has a lot to do with these big teams. They made it to the NBA championship last year, that they think that they can, flip a switch some nights and take some nights off. I think there's a lot of that. in the NBA, and that's come back to hurt them a lot. If you remember the game a couple months ago when they were in Oklahoma City and got murdered because they just rolled the ball out there because they thought they could win.
It was so bad.
AC had no SGA. Like I think that's what happens with the NBA a lot. But yeah, defense has not been great. I'm not overly concerned about it because I do think playoff time that everybody in the NBA, like all this like load management and guys just kind of taking nights off everyone's going to be going full tilt come April. So yeah, I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Smart in general, I think that you're right on in saying, and we are both in agreement that right now his value to the, and his role on the team is not as valuable. It's definitely the least essential it's been in his entire Celtics career because, and again, it's mainly just due to the fact that our team is the best it's ever been, and roster construction wise, in the history of Marcus Smart's Celtics career. So. I think overall wise though, I definitely disagree with you on him being the most overrated. I guess I don't have another Celtic in mind to supplant him as that, but you look at the accolades. He does have a Defensive Player of the Year award, obviously last season. He's got 3 first-team All-Defense, and I would actually go as far as to say, and this is going to drive you absolutely nuts, I think there's a path in which you can see 36 hanging in the rafters in the Boston Garden at some point. It's going to take a lot of things. I think a lot of things have to go right. I think you need a championship. The first and foremost, you need to have a championship title.
All it's going to take is one.
Yeah.
He's going to go up there. The fact that his name's going to be hanging up there with somebody like Larry Bird is absolutely sickening to my stomach because that's like a good basketball player.
Yeah,
but no, the city loves him. I mean, ownership loves him, and he's a guy that if they don't deal him, probably could be here. I'm not going to say a guy's going to be here the rest of his career because that's not how the NBA works anymore.
Yeah.
So
I think he has to be though. I think he has to stay. I think he has to be an exception to the widespread trend that nobody plays 20 years, 15 years, their entire career for the same team. Like I think if he checks that box and they do get a championship at some point and he maintains the level of production that he's at for the next he is getting up there a little bit. I think he's got to be 29 now, I would say. But if he keeps up the same level of play for the next 3-4 years and checks those other 2 boxes, I could see it doing that. But a lot of the reason is because of basically the campaigning he's already doing. The green hair, you touched on it. Yeah. Every media story, he's captain good PR, which it can be a little corny at times, even as a Celtics fan. I'll admit that, but. There's far worse storylines to be associated with. So I love Marcus.
It's a trend with the fanboys. They've done it. Daniel Tice, Kelly Olynyk, Semi Ojeleye. I mean, there was. I don't know if you know the guy Greeny or whatever that works for Barstool. Like, there's
he's the worst.
Out like Semi's stats guarding Giannis on like 16 possessions a few years ago. Like they do this with every player, but Smart's like on a different level because of how much I think the city loves him and because he's obviously better than those guys. It's like a different type of like overrating him because he is a real NBA player. Where guys like Daniel Tice and Semi Ojeleye even in the league anymore?
No,
I don't
can't
think so.
He certainly cannot be.
So.
he certainly shouldn't be. Yeah, no, I mean, it is, I'm not like the biggest fan of him getting his jersey retired someday and all that stuff, but if he checks those boxes, I'd say he's had about, and things go the way we were just projecting, I think that he's had, for him being a role player and through the lens of a role player, it's a pretty picture-perfect role player career arc he's on right now, and he's doing all the right things off the court, so I could see him getting there, but he does have to check some pretty big boxes.
Before we move on, I could definitely see the Celtics putting Deuce's number up there in the next couple of months. The way they're pushing for that little kid, too.
Little Deuce Tatum shot.
He's like to get that in there at least once. But, yeah, we're going to talk about creepy fanboy obsession. That's definitely one of them, but I'll leave it at that.
Oh, Deuce Tatum catching a stray. Oh, man, that's nobody's safe in this Celtics slide right here. Nobody's safe. Well, we're going to move.
Time, apparently.
Yeah, right. We're going to move on to a more positive storyline, I would argue. And we actually didn't even talk about this before. But obviously, I think the Celtics overall have certainly had a successful season. And I just wanted to ask you, what Celtic has impressed you the most as we sit here with 15 games left to go? What Celtic has impressed you the most this season?
Yeah, so I think Brogdon is kind of the easy answer. Like White, because I think White really stepped up when Smart was out for the last month or so. But I've even been impressed with Al Horford, who I don't think has been as good as he was last year. But he still has been, he's reliable. And right now, he's their top big because you can't rely on Rob Williams to stay healthy. So, and I'm no big fan of average Al, but I mean, I've been impressed with him. I think he's old too. Like, the guy's in his mid-30s, and I don't know. He seems to always get the job done. When they need a big three, he'll hit it. And Tatum's up there for me too. He just continues to take a step every single season. In my opinion, he's a top 5 player in the league. Honestly, I think he's closer to Luka than people give him credit for. But yeah, those are the 3 guys. It's hard to really like pick a single guy because they've all been pretty solid. I was even trying to think of, to be really negative, like who I'm the least impressed with. But that's kind of tough too. I mean, Smart's the easy answer, but that's who I would go with.
That's fair. See, I'd really prepared 2 answers. I really tried to hone in on, and just in case you picked one of my guys, but Al Horford was my backup because I was like, no chance he goes out average out. But I'm glad you showed Pop some love right there.
On Twitter for the record.
Yeah, I actually was going to check in. RJ, you were blocked by Anna Horford in what? Like probably like 2019? Is no update, no progression?
Even earlier than that. I mean, I would.
It was with his first stint with the C's, right? It had to have been
before. I would love if I could connect with her and apologize and get myself unblocked, but I don't know if Twitter blocks run out eventually. But I think I checked a year or 2 ago, and she still has me blocked. But maybe tough. One day we can meet up someplace.
Yeah, I mean, come on. When he came back to Boston, she should have found a way to reconnect with some of the more vile Boston fans, such as yourself. But anyway, back to the original question of the most impressive Celtics this season. I think 2 guys really jumped out to me. I felt like the obvious answer was Derek White. He's someone that I've just been blown away with. I think Brogdon's a great choice too. I just didn't really consider him just because this is obviously his first season with the team. For Brogdon's standpoint, the number one thing, I thought he was a fantastic player from the little I saw of him during his time with Indiana, but his whole thing was health, right? Like it was just, I knew if he was able to stay out there, he'd be a great player. And credit to him, he's played, I think, 54 of 65 potential games so far, somewhere around there. And that's, basically the league average is missing, 10 to 20 games, with how things are currently structured with load management in the NBA. So that's a really healthy season for Brogdon. He's been great. But, Derek White mainly, he's been fantastic, just to kind of, actually looking at the stats, they weren't even as stark of a difference from, comparing his stats this season to last year's playoff run. Obviously, we picked him up around the trade deadline, but I felt like, there was definitely an adjustment period there toward the back half of the regular season, and I wanted to look at his playoff numbers. In the 2022 playoffs, White averaged about 9, 3, and 3, 36% shooting from the field and 31% from 3. He's been much better than that this season. He's up to 12, 4, and 5, and he's shooting 46% from the floor. And the big thing is he's got, he increased his 3-point percentage 7%, going from 31% to 38%. And I feel like that is what you feel more than anything else out there, is that I feel comfortable with Derek White shooting the basketball. I feel like the question us Celtics fans asked ourselves heading into each and every game throughout the playoff run last year is, all right, what version of Derek White are we going to get? Are we going to get the shy, reserve Derek White that, he's like one of the few players you could visibly see second guessing himself throughout the game. And I feel like if there's any, just to go back to Joe Mazzulla, if there's anything he's done really well, I feel like it's building up White's confidence. And, maybe it's just because he was, the designated starter with all these injuries that we've dealt with, and he's started about 40 games for us this season. But he's really the obvious answer. And then, you touched on Al Horford as well. His numbers, post All-Star break have been fantastic. He's 14, 7, and 4. And the really incredible thing is, he's shooting 59% from the field and a whopping 62% from 3. So that's insane. RJ, I have to I myself under the bus here. I don't know if you caught it last night, but during the Knicks game, Al was on fire again. He was like 5 of 7 from 3 at some point, and I think I tweeted out I haven't seen Al Horford miss a single open 3 since the All-Star break, and then promptly, as you remember, the game-winning shot, he came up a little short. So I got to take credit for that, but.
It's crazy just how easily the Celtics got Brogdon and White too. Like it's just insane in the NBA how you can get impactful players for literally nothing. And now it's gotten to the point where teams are throwing 5 second-round picks at teams, and you're getting decent role players, which I really don't get what 5 first-round picks is going to do for you. But hey, I mean, we got Brogdon and White for some pretty good steal for both of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key to pulling off deals like that is you're targeting really solid role players on really bad teams, right? Like, what is the value of a Marcus Smart, obviously a Derek White, a Malcolm Brogdon, like a role player like that? that really raises the ceiling of a championship team, but doesn't really raise your floor a ton, in my opinion. So, like, you do deals with a team like Indiana or a team like San Antonio that could care less about winning. You're able to pick off, really solid players because the only players they care about keeping are, if they have a really young ascending star like a Tyrese Halliburton. San Antonio doesn't even have anyone that I would put in that bubble. And then they care about their draft picks the second most, right? So the fact that, Brad Stevens in his short time, as general manager has been able to pick off a few of those guys for the low has been pretty awesome. So I think that covers it. My final answer would be Derek White, and then Al Horford would kind of be my backup. I just love Al for what he's doing, and I think most importantly, too, Al's been averaging 34 minutes a game since the All-Star break, and he's 36. He's 2 years older than our head coach. So definitely some concern with the miles we're putting on Al right now, but he's an honorable mention as well. But anything else you wanted to add on Celtics that have impressed you this season?
No, I think those are pretty much the only two guys. Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, Tatum, we'll get to hear with the ceiling of the team, but everything's going to run through him come playoff time. And he just impresses me year after year. These last couple years, he keeps getting better. And, yeah, he's a bona fide superstar. We know that.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with that, we've obviously discussed the coaching, a couple of the different role players and people that have impressed you. But, in this slide right here, again, I'm looking at the standings right now where – it looks. I take that back. I don't know if these standings are up to date, but we're basically 2 games behind the Bucks, and for second place in the Eastern Conference. What do you feel is the absolute playoff ceiling of this team for the current season that we're in?
I think they could still, despite this last week, they could still go out and win the entire thing. I think it's good. The road getting there, I think, is going to be tougher now because Milwaukee has all this depth, and let's be honest, they gave us a test last year in the playoffs, and Middleton wasn't healthy. Middleton's going to be healthy. I'm not going to go as far to say that the season's a failure if they don't win the entire thing, but I do think it's going to be a huge disappointment if they can't even get back there. And I do think home court is pretty important. This isn't the NHL, the NBA, like, home court matters. Like, the majority of the time, the home team wins. Obviously, that didn't happen because we beat Miami, who had home court over us, so it's not like, make or break if you don't get home court, but... Yeah, I would say, anything short of getting to at least getting back to the NBA Finals is a huge, huge failure of a season.
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised to hear you say they could still win the chip because I agree with you. I think this last slide has been discouraging just from a health standpoint, to obviously lose, close games. And I think it makes it worse that you're obviously losing the teams that you could potentially face in the playoffs. But I definitely still think that this team has a ceiling of winning a championship. And I think in terms of, a better question, like you were saying, is what is a disappointing season and what does that look like? For me, if they get back to the finals, obviously that's fantastic. But I think it would, if they lose to any team, if the Celtics lose to any team in the Eastern Conference that's not named the Milwaukee Bucks, then I'll be disappointed because I still think that as currently constructed this team, we've had Philadelphia's number, for the last, I would say, 10 years on and on. I feel like that's a pretty safe estimate. Like, we've kind of owned them, and I think we're a bad matchup for Philly. And I think you need to be able to step on the necks of the frisky teams that we've run into over this last slide. Like, if you run into a Cleveland, you have more experience. You need to be able to beat that team. You run into a New York team that has no experience whatsoever and is just on suddenly a 9-game winning streak. Like, you got to step on their necks and take care of them in 5 games. Like, those are the team. And even if you run into a junkyard dog like Miami in the first round that nobody wants to see, I'm praying that doesn't happen, but it's increasingly more likely if we're at the 2 seed that we'd see Miami. So I still definitely feel like, the championship ceiling is still very much intact, and that's kind of my expectations. But, what is your biggest concern heading into the playoffs? It could be anything. It could be an opponent. It could be, the state of the team itself. But what has you the most frightened on what could prevent the Celtics from reaching their goal this season?
Yeah, so this actually just came to my head. I do fear, like we talked about what they were like the first half of last season. I hope that, those Celtics isn't still buried deep within these guys, and that doesn't come to the surface here as things continue to get worse. That's a fear. I don't think that's going to happen.
When you say those Celtics, you mean just like shortcomings from like Tatum and Brown and just... Okay.
Yeah, just like the way that they played the first half of last season, where they clearly, the team was a mess. That's pretty much what I'm talking. I don't think it's going to get to that point, but that's on the back of my mind. I don't think that's a huge concern. I'm worried about the big guy depth. I don't trust Robert Williams, He's never been healthy. I don't think he's going to be here for the playoffs because guess what? If he comes back, he's just going to get hurt again. This guy should have been dealt when his ceiling was at the highest. They should have brought in a real big guy like Miles Turner. You talked about it in the last episode. All the times they were linked to getting him. You cannot rely on Robert Williams as your number one big man. He's not going to be there when you need him. And Al Horford, like I said, he's been decent, but Al Horford's 30-something, like in his mid-30s. I don't like going in and then have the point where we have to have Cornette out here playing. Or Mike Muscala. It's not a good place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's aligned with my primary concern, and it's similar. But my big concern is another thing I spoke about in my last episode was just continuity between these teams that could actually win a title and how important that is. And obviously the Celtics, they've only really added and fortified their roster by adding in Malcolm Brogdon mainly in the offseason, but they have 4 games where their traditional starting 5, again, Smart, Brown, Tatum, Al, and Rob, they have 4 games where those guys have actually started together this season. And the number of on-court minutes, I couldn't get the exact metric before this podcast, but it's really low. Like it's like less than an hour of like in-game minutes, I want to say, or right around that mark. Of those guys playing on the court together. And that's substantial. And you're absolutely right. I think the hands down, without a doubt, the worst health bet of that group is Rob Williams. It's like, can we count on him being out there? And I think that's even more reason for Mazzulla to have, more of a willingness to go small at times where, maybe we just get used to having a lineup where White is just a fixture in the starting lineup. And then you're bringing in Rob and Brogdon off the bench, and then your bench is even deeper. Or even you start a guy like Grant, because I do, I feel okay about Grant. For the most part, I trust him despite, the full ballad of the Grant Williams experience we received tonight with him knocking down his first 4 threes and then losing the game at the line like we talked about earlier. I still trust him. I think, what he showed in the Milwaukee series last year certainly sticks out in my head still, where I feel comfortable about him playing those minutes, but Muscala has been pretty brutal since we got him. Like we obviously let Vonleh go. We have the ghost of Blake Griffin hanging around there. So I think you're right.
Sometimes I think Blake Griffin's even on the roster, and I know he started tonight, but
yeah,
he's been irrelevant.
Yeah, no, he hasn't been much of a help for us. But I just think that general continuity between those guys is a little bit concerning, and I think that because we certainly have more depth at the guard position, even the wing position, I feel pretty good about Hauser as well. Whereas the big man position, I feel like you really only have confidence in Grant. And I mean that drove me nuts tonight. I think, not to totally backtrack, but I just couldn't believe that like we were talking about in the Knicks game, they double overtime game. Grant Williams plays 40 minutes out there, and at the end of this game against the Cavs, it's like you have. Mazzulla showed a willingness to go small. He made the right decision of having, basically 3 guards in Smart, Brogdon, White, and then Jalen out there. And then as the 5th guy, he went with Cornette, which I thought was pretty interesting instead of going with Grant Williams, who you played before. And then he switched it to Muscala at times. And I don't know, like it's just, Cleveland went small, right? Like they didn't even have Allen out there. They just had Mobley as their one big. I know that you're still giving up a lot of size with Grant out there, but I don't know. It's just food for thought that I just can't quite wrap my head around these lineup decisions, and that, along with the continuity, is what concerns me the most.
Cornette, Scal was yelling on. I don't know if you get the NBC Boston broadcast out there, but he's yelling to Cornette to get back on defense, and he's like under their hoop trying to.
Yeah, and it's like, dude, you're the slowest guy out there, and he's
on defense.
He's got
going down and score. It was either they scored or Mitchell ended up going to the line. He's a borderline NBA player, and I don't like that he's getting. Like I said, does that mean is he going to play in the playoffs? Probably not. No, but these games do matter in retrospect of where they're going to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right on with that, but. Like I said, I still like the way that they match up against basically every team besides Milwaukee, which, obviously who got so much better. They're light years ahead of where they were last season, which is obviously the main concern if you're a Celtics fan.
When I say big failure, I mean, I don't mean let's blow the team up by any means. I just think it would be pretty disappointing because you don't know how long you have these guys for. And I know that sounds crazy because Tatum and Brown are so young, but I mean, Brown's not signed long term. We don't know what's going through his mind, and I still think the window's very much open, but I mean, these guys shoot their way out of town all the time. It's not crazy to say that could happen to Brown in the next 2 years. I don't think it will, but I don't know. You got to take every top opportunity you have to go win the thing, especially if they're a deep team this year. So, yeah, I hope to see him back in the NBA Finals. if I had to predict,
Yeah.
I think they're going to get back there. I think they're going to beat Milwaukee. I think Giannis is the best player in the world, but to be completely honest, I don't really love or respect his game. I think if Adam Silver wakes up tomorrow morning and decides, like, I'm going to have the NBA officials actually call carrying the basketball and travels, him and his cheerleader brother will be working at the local Wendy's.
couple strays. RJ was like, yeah, Deuce Tatum catches a stray in the first segment, and we're going at the top dog and Giannis with the next segment here.
The Giannis one. I've been thinking about that for a little bit.
Wow,
yeah, I almost forgot about the Giannis take. I'm obviously half kidding, but I don't think it's really fair when a guy of his size can pick the ball up at the half court and go like a torpedo towards the net and carry the basketball all the way there. That's not basketball, but I'm not going to be the guy that complains about how the NBA's play, because that's just how it is. So
yeah, it is how it is, and I still think, and just in terms of my favorite teams to watch, I'd still rather watch them than watch the foul merchants that are the Sixers, and watching Embiid do it in a way that I feel like is even less fun to watch and more frustrating, but equally as helpless, because you have a guy even bigger than Giannis technically, and he's able to get to the line at such a ridiculous clip. It's like, I don't even know what you're supposed to do as a defender. But either way, I mean, I still think that the Celtics, it's going to be a tough road in Milwaukee, but kind of looking at the standings here, so you got Milwaukee, and again, this might be updated as of early morning on March 6th here, but the Celtics are basically 2 games back of the Bucks, and then the Sixers are basically a full 2.5 games back of the Celtics, and then you have Cleveland closely behind them. But what I'm really looking at here is that I think the top 5 seeds in the East are essentially set. I'd be pretty surprised to see any team creep into the top 5 that's not already there. So it's going to be Bucks or Celtics atop, and then I think the Sixers are pretty locked into 3. And I think 4-5 is going to be Cleveland and New York, Knicks in some order. And then after that, you have the Nets, who are probably going to fall a little bit, and I think Miami or Atlanta can rise. But more importantly, just looking at it from a Celtics fan perspective, we're not going to have to play a New York in the first round. We're not going to have to play a Cleveland in the first round. And honestly, I don't even think we'd have to play them in the second round. I think that our destiny, if I really had to pick, is I think we're going to end up as a 2 seed, and I think we're going to end up playing a team like maybe Miami or Atlanta in the first round, and then we'll probably play Philadelphia in the second round. And honestly, with how we fared against,
don't scare me in the slightest. That team is just reeks of loser. Harden's a loser, Embiid's a loser. I mean, we beat them, I believe, within the last month or so. We didn't even have some of our top guys, or at least we went wire to wire with them. We've always had their number. I think I get how good Embiid is. But Harden's won scoring titles before. I think I've been looking at the stats a lot. He's starting to get a little more aggressive, but I'm starting to dude, can you go score and do your own thing? I know they have to run everything through Embiid, but I don't know. That team doesn't scare me in the slightest. I don't even care if they had home court over us, which I don't think we're going to fall to the 3 seed, but no, Philadelphia is not even in the slightest put anything to me.
Exactly, and I think the interesting thing, right, is that as I was saying that, and why it's relevant, and I think whoever's going to be the 1 seed, and it's likely going to be Milwaukee. And again, we have a lot left to play, and things can change. But again, subject to any crazy injury, I really do think the Celtics will end up as the 2 seed here, with a chance of getting the 1. But it's gonna be Cleveland and New York, almost certainly facing off in round 1. I don't know who's gonna have home court, but those are 2 teams. We're now 1-3 against the Knicks, and we haven't beat the Knicks. And the 1 win we have against the Knicks was in early November, so basically the second week of the season. And then we're 1-3 against Cleveland, and very famously, all 3 of those losses came in overtime. So. You talk about a team where, maybe they have our number a little bit. I would say Knicks are pretty high on that list, and Cleveland's right there too. And, maybe I just think we match up a little bit better against Philadelphia
this
because
is a war zone this year.
Yeah.
Think about what it used to be like the East versus West. It was the West that was loaded. The East is loaded now. Those teams 1 through, especially 1 through 4, I think Cleveland's a really good basketball team. And New York, the Knicks beat us last night without Brunson. They're killing. What have they won 8 in a row or something like that? I know they've been playing.
Yeah, 9 now.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, I think with that kind of puts a bow on the Celtics and the vibe check. It's certainly pretty low, a lot lower than I thought it was going to be heading into this podcast, especially, basically being 3/4 into the game tonight. But I think they're still in a good spot. We agree that they can still contend for a championship. We're pretty happy with Joe Mazzulla overall, and we'll agree to disagree on some Marcus Smart outlook. But with that, did you want to get into a little bit of load management, perhaps? I heard you had a take on load management that's been weighing on your mind.
Yeah, listening to the episode last week, and you were talking about how you wanted to see the NBA season get shortened, but like the TV deals and the NBA and these owners don't want to give up all that money. I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon, but I do wonder if these big media companies, ESPN, TNT, are getting a little sick of the fact that they pay hundreds of millions of dollars to have these primetime games, and then the best players not play. It happens all the time on Friday nights when a team's playing a back-to-back from a Thursday or a Tuesday to a Wednesday. And I do wonder if at some point they're going to get a little sick of that and maybe they'll transition to a 70-game season. I don't think it's – I'm kind of dreaming here. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but I wouldn't mind if the season got shrunk down by 12 games because I'm just so sick of the load management crap. Like, there's some of these guys are just not going to play on back-to-backs. Like Kawhi Leonard, he used to be one of my favorite players in the league who I have like close to zero respect for. Now, I just the way some of these guys just will not go out there. I love what Anthony Edwards said in the last couple weeks, saying that he can't stand the load management stuff. And I don't like. It's not fair to put this on the players that like. Obviously, some people are saving up money to go to these games, but it is a little crappy if there's a kid that has been saving up money or his parents had to take him to a game and like these best players aren't playing, and they make plenty of money where they should like. I don't know. It's a hard thing that the NBA would be able to enforce that there's going to be no load management, but I would rather see the season get shortened if that means that it's going to get rid of this crap because I hate.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have NBA League Pass. I hate when I see a primetime game the next night, and I know that the starter's not playing. Like, one of a big name, like it happened with the Hawks. Young's not playing. And it just, I do wonder if an ESPN or a TNT is going to get fed up with it eventually. It probably won't happen anytime soon, but we'll see.
I mean, I think that, I'm right there with you. I'm definitely a League Pass connoisseur. It's a self-proclaimed League Pass connoisseur anyways. And, the number one thing that I do is when I'm about to look at these games is I go into my The Score app, shout out The Score, prefer them over the ESPN app, and I'll go to the injuries tab and I'll see what's up. Like, I just never know because on a night-to-night basis, it's like I can know that, Kawhi Leonard's not hurt, but there's a 50-50. It's a coin flip whether he's actually going to play in the game or, whoever. It's obviously not just the Clippers, and but I think the tricky thing is that, I sit here and it drives me nuts, and I just want to see the best players play. And as someone who, shout out my guy Connor O'Shea, my best friend, we went to a Celtics game when we were in the 4th grade. It was the 2007 season, the year before the Celtics won the chip. And we went to a Celtics-Cavs game. So, supposed to get Pierce versus LeBron, and they were both out of the blue. Like, they weren't, like, actually hurt. Like, it was, and this is obviously way before load management, but I was like, we were crushed, and those were two dog shit teams, like absolutely terrible teams. Like, you go back to the Basketball Reference page, it is terrible what those teams look like. So we were like, you're paying to see Pierce and LeBron, you don't get them, you're crushed, and I have sympathy for that. But one thing I will say on the load management piece is, on a night like tonight, I was like, yeah, it's good that we rested Al. It's good that we rested Tatum because they played, 40 minutes. It's hard when you're, I will say we're the elite, one of the elites right now, where we're in a team that has a very real championship aspiration, and that much has been proven by making the finals last season. Like, I love being, sitting here and telling you I love when the stars play, but it makes sense. Like, it's really, like, there's a lot of data that goes into it, and I don't necessarily have it prepared in advance of this podcast to go over. I don't know if that's what people want to hear, but there's a lot of data that says the load management is pretty effective for the most part, and it, certainly helps keep these guys on the court for when it matters the most. And so it's difficult to combat. But I do think that something needs to be done, and it doesn't need to, it needs to happen this offseason. And my proponent, I think
the bargaining agreement might be coming up.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And, like, I don't know how you feel right now. It's the first week of March. I'm just kind of like, bring on the playoffs already. Like, we're coming down to the stretch here. Like, it's a long season. Like, bring on April. I'm ready to go. I'm sure the players are, too. I think that's why you see a lot of these guys kind of, now the playoffs are right around the corner, and they're trying to get some extra rest in. And like you said with Tatum, like, I don't want to see him get rested, but it's hard to not want it to happen when the rest of the league is doing it, and you don't want him to have all these extra miles on his body come playoff time.
Exactly, and more so with a guy like Al. But yeah, and what I think it needs to come down to this, right? Like, And it makes it difficult because I'm a nerd about clearly the All-Star game, and I'm a nerd about the All-NBA teams and all that stuff. Like, I care about that shit. I think it's cool. I think it's cool to look back through the years and you know, take a look at those lists and find out which players were actually the best for their respective time. And so I care about that stuff, and I think the players do too, to an extent, right? Like, I think there needs to the number one change that they can make, and Adam Silver is clearly, you know, a people pleaser, and he doesn't rule with an iron fist like David Stern famously did before. But I think a change that he can make is putting real stipulations on the All-Star game, all NBA teams, and then all, like, you know, basically end of season awards, so MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, etc., where, you know, 55 games is a cutoff. You need to play in 55 games to be eligible for, you know, an all-NBA team or an all-defensive
team.
team.
Because, I mean, like we talk about, if Brown makes one of the all-NBA teams, he can get the Supermax. Like, that's millions and millions of dollars.
Exactly. Yeah. The All-Star game is just a title, and obviously that's, you know, basically 2/3 of the way through the season anyway, so that would have to be like a 40-game cutoff or something like that, or a 35-game cutoff. But for All-NBA, you're right. That has real financial implications for these players. But I do think that is fair for the most part. You know what I mean? To have a cutoff of that. And maybe there's some sort of injury clause in it. Like, again, I think the other incentive and the way you could do it is obviously financially, like putting it in these guys' contracts and having a minimum number of games. But that's going to take a lot longer to implement, because then you're, you know, dealing with all the agents, and there's these deals that have already been negotiated and have their own incentives that are already built in. So it would take years for that to kind of come into effect, where I feel like
need to see another lockout either.
No, exactly. It's not
locked out in, I think it was
2011?
2011. It was whatever year the Celtics ended up losing the East Finals to the Heat, I believe.
Yeah, I think that tracks. But I'm right there with you. I mean, I've definitely had it with the load management, but I think it is tricky as a contending team that doesn't mind seeing its guys get some extra rest. But I do think that putting like a firm cutoff, whatever that is, maybe it's not 55 games, but I feel like that's kind of fair. Where, you know, people can be strategic with it, where there can be some load management, but there can also be some real, you know, if you have a 10-game injury early in the season, then you really can't afford to load manage too much, and teams are going to have to manage that. But I think that would be a fair way to at least start the process of, you know, being able to combat this in a way that, you know, teams still have some flexibility to rest guys here and there. But
so before we move on, what hurt more, LeBron breaking your heart or Paul Pierce breaking your heart at Yankee Candle?
that was one.
Sorry, we got to meet Delonte West and Justin Reed. No big deal.
Yeah, I think just to give the audience some backtrack, it was Yankee Candle circa like 2004.
3 or 5 or something.
Yeah, we was I think we waited in a line at Yankee Candle in like Deerfield, Massachusetts for probably like, I mean, I have no sense of time.
I think
like
it was
8,
7
but
out.
It was a day.
7 hours.
It was like a day of our life in a line at Yankee Candle waiting to get an autograph from Paul Pierce. And we could literally see Pierce. Like, we watched him, and we got to the front of the line, we watched him wave goodbye, and we got to, you know, he was quickly supplanted, like RJ alluded to, by NBA legend Delonte West. And unfortunately not revered for his on-the-court game, most of his off-the-court struggles. Hope that guy's doing well. And we got his autograph and Justin Reed instead. So no, that definitely takes the cake. Not meeting Paul Pierce and not getting his autograph that day. I think that really scarred me for life. Still don't even have a Paul Pierce autograph, and that was my first favorite player. So thanks for bringing up those wounds in the midst of a terrible Celtics vibe check.
They're my wounds too. But,
yeah, right.
No, another NBA topic I wanted to get to is is Ja Morant. I don't know if you saw the story that came out tonight too, that apparently there was a players only meeting that was held in Steven Adams. Was one that held the meeting, obviously a respected veteran in the league. And Ja Morant still goes out to the club and pulls out a gun at a club. And, like how stupid are you?
Yeah, that's bad.
One thing to do that, and then you're posting it on social media.
Yeah.
I
think it's tough, and just I don't want to go too far in depth on it, because I think a lot of this stuff with the Ja Morant situation is a lot of hearsay right now. I know the league is investigating seemingly like 5 different issues with the guy, but just to quickly do a backtrack, there was an early report that Ja Morant may or may not have beaten up a kid like in the summer, which was a bad look. Obviously, he was like a 17-year-old, so almost an adult, but certainly not an adult still by the word of the law there. But so that's a tough look, and again, I don't know if that actually took place. And then more importantly, there was basically an issue after I think the Grizzlies had played the Pacers, and it was an event where like after they were, I think they were headed like the team plane or something like that. It was certainly after the game where I think some staff on the Pacers, maybe some management, maybe training staff felt like threatened, and that there was potentially a red dot spotted on one of the guys after being in a conflict with, it might not have been Ja Morant, but it was definitely his like posse, people that Ja Morant was in a vehicle with. So in the aftermath of that, surrounding something that in the realm of gun violence, and the Grizzlies have obviously been sliding, that I talked about in a previous podcast they've been on. Certainly a downward spiral, record-wise, wins and loss-wise, compared to where they were early in the season. And then, like you mentioned, Ja Morant, importantly, whipped out a gun on what appeared to be a gun on Instagram Live in the early hours of the morning.
Because I believe it happened in Denver.
I think so.
Too. So, I mean...
It's a bad look.
Memphis is up there. They're 2 in the standings. I don't think they're the best team, but they're still trending in the right direction. And to have your best player out acting like a complete idiot a month before the playoffs, it's not going to end well if he keeps surrounding himself with these. Like, you hear the people he's surrounding himself with. They're not exactly good people. And then even when the Memphis got into the scuffle, I wanted to say the Staples Center, but it's called the Crypto Arena, whatever it's called now, with Shannon Sharp. When that whole thing happened, his dad got involved. I hate the Grizzlies.
I'm right there. I'm not a Grizzlies guy. Sorry, Norm. Norm might be the only person that would ever listen to this podcast that's a Grizzlies fan at this point in time. But no, I think it's obviously a terrible look. I think just the frustrating thing is that they have all this negative PR surrounding it, and there's nothing he could have done more of a self-inflicted wound than, all right, let's set up the camera and let's take out the blicky and wave it around. Like, that is like no one's fault but his own in that situation. Did he have a few drinks in him? Probably, if it was the early hours of the morning, and clearly he wasn't in the right state to be making that type of decision. It's just terrible. But I think the crazy thing is that he's one of, what I look at it through the lens of, is he's one of 5 dudes with his own signature shoe with Nike. Like, he's in that, like, Nike has always kept their signature shoe deals, like, a lot of people are sponsored by Nikes and they wear, the general Nike shoes, or they wear LeBrons, but to have their own shoe, like, he took the Kyrie spot. Kyrie, we watched a guy fumble that bag early in the season with all the stuff we talked about earlier with Kyrie. They give it over to Ja Morant, and it's like he does one of the only things, possible to blow it. It has to be an off the court thing. It's nothing on the court is going to end this shoe deal really before it gets going. So I think that's really disappointing, but I guess my hot take of it all is I think it'll be fine. I think this blows over. He's currently suspended indefinitely by the Grizzlies, but I think it ends up being 2 games because they're a competitive team. I don't know if you have any thoughts on where you think this is headed.
Just real quick, I know there's rumors that the NBA eventually wants to have an expansion team in Vegas or move a team to Vegas. That will be a disaster.
Another hard pivot to Vegas. I think it's a market that could support an NBA team, but I don't
think that would be the issue. We all know.
Just the
Vegas. Yeah, think the nightlife would be. I don't know. I don't know how the Raiders. We know what happened with the whole Henry Ruggs situation. I don't know I don't know what it's been like with the other players, but.
Yeah, I could see the. What I will say, if there's a Vegas team, I expect their home winning percentage to be much higher than what it is on the road. Unsurprisingly, it's going to be like guys like Harden are going to be exhausted. You're going to expect some low output on big name stars when they come in to play the Las Vegas Gamblers or whatever they end up making their logo. I don't think it would be the Gamblers. I'm not feeling very creative right now, but I think that puts a bow on most of our NBA storylines. Unless you had anything else here.
No, that was it.
Perfect.
Just some notes from the week. I had like the Luka Booker. They got into like that little scuffle yesterday.
A little tiff, if you will.
I can't stand Devin Booker at all. Something about, I don't know if you've seen the clips with the playoffs last year where he was like taunting Luka too, and like apparently Luka's one of the nicest guys in the league too. And honestly, Booker is nowhere near Luka's level.
Yeah, they're not.
I can't stand that. And then just another quick thing is, I saw this clip of like all the illegal screens Draymond Green sets, and I watched it a part of the Lakers Warriors game, and it was incredible. I noticed it like 45 seconds into watching the game. He's like he's a fullback blocking for a running back in football. And the refs there's certain guys that they'll just let it go, and he's one of them.
I haven't seen that compilation that you're talking about, but I think it would probably, if you went back to like their first, championship team in like 2015, I bet it would be even worse because you had him and Andrew Bogut just running around like checking dudes. Especially, I actually missed the return of Steph on Sunday. I missed that game, but I did catch whatever the Celtics game later in the day, and I watched the earlier game that day on ABC. But either way, like it's just, especially the return of Steph, you're going to get a lot of those illegal screens for sure. So I think that's pretty interesting. But quickly before I let you go here, I wanted to do one quick off-topic segment. I think we're in, the peak of advertising season, if you will. I would argue. I mean, I think we're entering into March Madness. We're on the heels coming off the Super Bowl. Entering into NBA playoffs. We're obviously watching a lot of sports. What is, in your opinion, the absolute worst commercial on TV right now?
So for me, it's the Burger King commercial.
Okay, I was hoping you were going to say that.
Go
continue.
Jingle.
Do you care to sing it? Can we get you to sing it one time?
I'm trying to think. I can't even remember it off the top of my head.
It's just the Whopper, 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 Whopper. You're overthinking it.
It's BK.
Oh, the full jingle. Have it your way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Then
you rule.
Yeah.
You rule. Yeah. No, you can't forget that.
Awful.
So I actually don't mind that one as much. They also have a bunch of renditions of that. The Whopper, 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 Whopper one is certainly the one that kickstarted it and grew legs, if you will. I think the worst one of the series is probably the most recent one that I've seen, where they just go burger, cheese. I don't know if you've seen that one. Like they literally chant. They chanted. They close it the same way. I think by all accounts, like the memes behind it and like some of the publicity that it's gotten, I can't hate on it too much because I think from what the outsider's perspective, it seems to be pretty successful.
I'm a Burger King guy. People hate on Burger King. I like Burger King. I'm a Burger King guy. They have the best chicken sandwich in the game, in my opinion.
Whoa!
Yeah,
hot takes.
Yep.
That's a really hot take.
Yep.
Where you also want to
right up there with KFC, Chick-fil-A.
Popeyes?
Hate on Burger King for no reason. Oh, yep, them too.
Wow, that is a scorcher.
Nobody ever has it or talks about it. I've had it a couple times. I've loved it, and I've always liked their chicken there.
Wow, we might need a follow up. I know the chicken fries were pretty popular. I'm gonna have to go to I'm gonna have to document it and follow up on Twitter.
You gotta
maybe
make
post
sure you
a clip.
get the real one though, not like one of like the ones that they've had for a while. I think.
Okay, so they have like a more recent one
now, like on the menu.
Yeah,
like they might. Don't get the one with the lettuce and tomato on it. That's like their old one.
That's like their equivalent of like a McChicken, because like McDonald's has like a real chicken sandwich, and then they got the McChicken that everyone's familiar with. So that's wow. Coming from a Burger King guy though, you don't. No offense, I feel like you're a dying breed being in the Burger King guy.
No,
sphere.
there's not many of us.
There's not many of you left. I don't know if there ever were many. No,
people slander Arby's too. I like Arby's.
Wow.
And there's not a lot. I don't know if you guys have a lot of Arby's out in Texas. We only have one here in Western Mass. I haven't been there in a while. I like Arby's.
I think you
roast beef fast food any day of the week. Doesn't matter to me.
Wow. I mean, I'm not even prepared to respond to that right now. I might need to recoup and talk to my Arby's guy. Shout out Brandon. He's really the only Arby's guy I got in my corner. I'm going to have to compare and contrast. I actually, when I worked for the Timberwolves, it was like 5 years ago. They're pretty big on Arby's out there in the Midwest, and people really started to gas it up around the office. And, people were like, oh, we're going to take Wallace and we're going to climb Meat Mountain. And they made me get like a Meat Mountain, which was just a shitload of different deli meat in between, sandwich buns. Like no condiment, no cheese. I was like,
they have some
what is this?
You see on these commercials they have that are just like, I would try it.
Horrible.
They're putting like everything on it, and like, I mean, our friend Peter got food poisoning from the Arby's in Western Mass too. So I mean, I'm not gonna talk about too much. I've always had good experiences, so go there at your own risk.
Yeah, here I thought we were doing the Lord's work for Arby's, and we just get a quick food poisoning review. But anyway, not an Arby's guy, certainly not a Burger King guy either. But I will say, I give back to the original question about the commercial. I do think that the Burger King ad campaign's been pretty successful. I did get it. I got the $5 Your Way meal. It was good value for a workday lunch. Wasn't too sluggish, it wasn't too much food, but. My answer to this question, and it's hands down, like there's one commercial that is reign supreme at pissing me off. I'm glad you mentioned the Burger King one, but the most recent Verizon commercial, if you've seen it, it has Cicely Strong, who's the woman that was on SNL for like 10 years, and then Seth Meyers, who's also on SNL, is like really famous. There's a Verizon commercial where, it's on all the time. I don't know if it's just on my streaming software or what, but like they're looking at like puppies for a sec to open it up. And then, then they're just sitting on like a giant sign in the road, and they're like, well, I love about Verizon. And they go back and forth for like, seemingly forever. It's really only a 30-second ad, but there's no point to it. It's really, really obnoxious. And at the end, the woman is just like, hey, we're sitting on a sign here. And she does like this dog shit Boston accent that really just drives me nuts. I have like no idea where that came from. And the thing that just drives me nuts is the commercial's horrible. It's a terrible watch. It plays nonstop, so the frequency definitely gets on my nerves. And it's bad. It doesn't work. Like, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know if I black out from the rage, but it's really bad. But I think the worst part about it is that they pay top dollar to bring in two people from SNL, like objectively funny, famous, recognizable people, and then they just make them say the dumbest shit that you can imagine, and it's horrible.
These companies that pay all this money for celebrities to come in and do like ad campaigns for them, because how much revenue are they really making off of bringing this person in? Half the people, like when a commercial comes on, like I've probably seen the commercial you're talking about. I look at my phone, I scroll through Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't want to watch these commercials, and like you see how much money that these companies probably spent for the Super Bowl just for the ad itself.
Oh yeah,
you had Will Ferrell in a commercial. They probably paid him $1 million. Bryan Cranston was in a Pops commercial, or Popcorners, I think it's called.
Yeah, it was some discount Doritos commercial. It seemed like it was weird though, but yeah. No, I think it's interesting. The thing that just drives me nuts is if you're going to pay top dollar to bring those people on, like, especially those people that come from like a sketch comedy background, like, hey, can they give their like input on what they're saying to make it like relatively funny? Because it's absolutely terrible, man. It's bad. A lot of bad ads out there now. Not many good ones.
One more. This one's been around for a long time. It's a radio commercial and a TV. It's not on the TV lot. It's the Cars for Kids commercial.
I can't say I'm familiar. You might have to enlighten me.
It's just a jingle.
Okay.
It's just like these kids. It's like to donate your car for kids to go towards.
Oh, okay.
And it's
did they get like a little children's choir action? And we know you hate kids because of Deuce Tatum and everything, so you're just like, oh, Deuce Tatum, and you get pissed.
That
would
be the ultimate like collision of the world if I saw Cars
Deuce Tatum in a Cars for Kid
character.
Probably. I mean, if you're listening to it on the radio, they're probably like a Boston-based business. Who knows, man? Who knows?
Oh yeah, and then right now in Massachusetts, so sports betting's legal now, but just at the casinos. But they go mobile on Friday
soon,
this
right?
week. The commercials have just been insufferable. Like, the commercials themselves aren't that bad, but I'm talking like every time it goes to commercial, whether it's DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, they're everywhere. Like Kevin Hart's in the DraftKings commercial and Gronk's in the FanDuel, and God, talk about two just annoying human beings. But no, that's pretty much all I had for those are my commercials I could think of. I was thinking of it because I said I know there's worse commercials and I just cannot think of them. Right
no,
now.
I think you picked the top dog. You address the elephant in the room in the BK commercials. Everyone's got an opinion. It's just I think I've seen enough of the BK where I've come full circle and I kind of respect them now because it actually got me to buy a Whopper one time. But I think with that, I think we're basically ready to sign off here. RJ Rosazza, it's been a real treat. I should have mentioned earlier, RJ Rosazza, formerly of the JDA pod. You know, can I ask the question that we're all thinking? Are we ever going to get the band back together? Are we ever going to get Dick, Jesse, and Andy back in the same pod?
I believe the last episode we ever did was the episode you were on.
It was pretty close. I think you did one more after I was on.
No, I'd rather drop dead than do another podcast with you if you want me to be completely blunt and honest about it.
Oh my God.
So I don't know if they'll hear this, but that will never happen. If anyone needs me in a guest role occurring, come on every now and then. I'm more than willing to do that. But no, no thanks.
Okay. Well, with that, I'm certainly going to take you up on that offer. This was a lot of fun to chop it up Celtics time. As we discussed, I think we both have a pretty high ceiling for the Celtics. So maybe I'm hoping once we get a little closer to the playoffs, maybe like right before the playoffs start, we can bring you back on and discuss the Celtics first round matchup. And I want to get you on consistently.
It's been a while since I've done this. It was good to get back on the horse.
Absolutely, man. Well, we loved having you on. We will be back next week. I have my friend Ian Kayanja of A to Z Sports Dallas, D Magazine, and a couple other sites on. He's a credentialed media member for the Dallas Mavericks, so we're going to be talking some Mavericks next week. But before you guys go, be sure to follow the podcast everywhere at Words with Wallace on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Music. Definitely give me a follow, share the show, tell a friend, and let me know. Give us some responses here.
Review too. Rate
and review.
The algorithm. So a 5-star
we love
review that could help get on the main feed, not the main feed, but eventually move up the charts. So I think that's
who knows. Love those stars. Podcast. Love those stars. Got to have those stars. Definitely appreciate it. And I will see you guys next week. With that, I'm going to hit this button and give me some feedback too. Definitely let me know what ads are pissing you off the most. How do you feel about the Celtics future and any other segments that we talked on? I will catch you guys next week.